Your blood pressure cuff reads 128/78. Your doctor nods. You nod. And yet you're more tired than you were 5 years ago. The weight keeps creeping around your middle no matter what you do, and one flight of stairs leaves you winded in a way it never used to. Here's the quiet part nobody says out loud. That perfectly acceptable number on the cuff can be the reason for the other three. The little pill that pulls the reading down can be working against the rest of your body at the very same time, and because the cuff looks fine, nobody ever connects them. If you're over 60 and you were started on a blood pressure pill years ago that no one has re-examined since, the next few minutes are for you. By the end, you'll know whether yours is one of the pills the American guidelines quietly stopped recommending, the 3 specific ways it can drain a body over 60, and the exact questions that finally get it looked at instead of refilled on autopilot for another 3 years. I've spent years as an emergency physician, and the ER is where you meet the downstream version of everything. You don't see the prescription that gets written. You see the person 3 years later. And by then, the small stuff has quietly stacked up into the big stuff, almost every time. So on this channel, I take the science that has genuinely moved on and translate it into plain English for anyone past 60, because a rushed 12-minute appointment will never give your doctor the room to explain what I'm about to walk you through. And I want to be clear about the shape of this from the very start, because it's easy to hear a video like this and panic. This is not a video telling you your medication is poison. It isn't. For millions of people, it's exactly right. This is a video about a much narrower, much sneakier problem. A medication that was a reasonable choice the day it was prescribed, that may no longer be the best fit for the person you've become since, sitting in your cabinet, getting refilled every 90 days, with nobody ever asking the question again. That's it. That's the whole thing. And it is astonishingly common. So let's start by throwing out the wrong question. The wrong question is my number okay? Your number might be beautiful. The right question, the one almost nobody asks, is the medication producing this number still the right one for me, at my age, with everything else going on in my body right now? Those are 2 completely different questions. And the entire trap is that a good number answers the first one so convincingly that nobody ever gets around to the second. Let me give you the scale of this, because it matters. Here in the US, close to half of all adults, about 120 million people, have high blood pressure. That's the Centers for Disease Control's number, and only about 1 in 4 of them actually has it under control. So this is not a niche issue. This is one of the most common reasons anyone your age walks into a doctor's office at all. And the medication I'm about to focus on is one of the most swallowed pills in the entire country. One of these drugs, metoprolol, is prescribed to the tune of nearly 60 million prescriptions a year in the US. It sits around the 6th most prescribed medication in the nation. So if this turns out to apply to you, you are in enormous company, and you did nothing wrong. You took the pill you were told to take. That was the right instinct. The pill I'm talking about belongs to a family called beta blockers. And to understand why the fit matters so much, you have to understand what one actually does once it's inside you, because it's genuinely elegant, and it explains every single thing that comes later. Picture your heart muscle as being dotted with tiny docking points. Doctors call them beta receptors, but think of them as little sockets. Adrenaline, the hormone your body pumps out when you climb a hill, lift something heavy, or get a jolt of stress, is shaped to plug straight into those sockets. When it docks, it sends one message: beat faster, beat harder. That's your body getting ready to do something. A beta blocker is a molecule shaped to sit in those same sockets and take up the space, so the adrenaline arrives and finds nowhere to plug in. The message never gets delivered, so your heart rate settles, every beat lands with a touch less force, and the pressure inside your arteries eases downward. Simple, clever, effective. That's the entire idea. Think of it as a governor bolted onto an engine, the kind that caps how fast the engine can ever rev, no matter how hard you press the pedal. Now hold on to that governor image, because it's the key to the whole video, and we'll come back to it. You might already know your pill by name. The most common ones for people your age are metoprolol, sold as Lopressor or Toprol XL, atenolol, sold as Tenormin, then propranolol, bisoprolol, carvedilol, which is sold as Coreg, and nebivolol, sold as Bistolic. Here's the quick tell. Almost every one of them ends in the same 2 letters, O-L-O-L, olol. If the drug on your bottle ends in olol, you are almost certainly holding a beta blocker. Keep that in your back pocket. We're going to use it later when I ask you to actually go and read the label. And now the part where I have to be completely fair, because if I skip this, I've misled you. For certain hearts, a beta blocker is not just helpful, it is life-saving, and I would reach for one without a second's hesitation. If you've had a heart attack, if you're living with heart failure where the heart's pumping strength is genuinely reduced, if your heart drops into a dangerous racing rhythm, then slowing and steadying that heart is exactly what the muscle needs, and the evidence there is rock solid. Decades of it. So don't walk away from this thinking, I've branded these pills dangerous. I've told you the exact opposite. A good tool used for the right job is a wonderful thing. The problem was never the tool. The problem is who else ended up holding it, and why nobody ever took it back. So how did a pill the guideline now sidesteps end up in so many cabinets, maybe including yours? Simple. For decades, beta blockers were the easy go-to for plain, ordinary high blood pressure. Not for a damaged heart, just for a number that ran high. They were cheap. They were familiar. They brought the reading down, so doctors wrote them by the tens of millions. 2 full generations got started this way, and yours may well have been one of those prescriptions. Then the research caught up, and the verdict was unkind. Back in 2005, one of the biggest blood pressure trials ever conducted tracked more than 19,000 people who were living with high blood pressure. It's known as the ASCOT trial. Half were treated on a plan built around a beta blocker, atenolol. The other half on a plan built around a different drug, amlodipine, which lowers pressure by relaxing the walls of your arteries instead of putting a governor on your heart. 2 big groups, matched up, followed for years, head-to-head. And the trial was actually stopped early, before its planned finish, because the gap between the 2 groups had already grown too wide to keep going in good conscience. The people who were not on the beta blocker had noticeably fewer strokes, fewer deaths from heart disease, and here's the one to hold on to, about 30% fewer new cases of diabetes. Remember that. I'm coming back to it because it turns out to be a bigger deal than it sounds. And ASCOT wasn't alone. That same year, a review that pooled together trials covering more than 100,000 patients looked specifically at atenolol, the single most common beta blocker of that era, and found that people on it had roughly a quarter more strokes than people on other blood pressure drugs and a small but real bump in death from any cause. Not because it failed to lower the number. It lowered the number just fine. It simply didn't protect the person as well as the alternatives did, and in one specific way, stroke, it did measurably worse. Now, here is where I need you to hear the American part clearly, because this is where most videos get it wrong by quoting the wrong country's rulebook. In 2017, the 2 organizations that write the blood pressure guidelines that your own American doctor is supposed to be following, the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association, laid out which drugs should be the first choice for ordinary high blood pressure. They named 4 families: thiazide diuretics, which are gentle water pills; calcium channel blockers, like that amlodipine from the trial; ACE inhibitors; and ARBs. 4 first-line choices. And beta blockers are not on that list. They didn't get banned, and they stayed firmly recommended for those specific heart conditions I mentioned. But for plain high pressure with nothing else going on, the American guideline quietly moved them off the front shelf almost a decade ago. So sit with the gap for a second. The official American recommendation says beta blockers usually shouldn't be the first pick for simple high blood pressure, and yet millions of Americans are still on one as their main, and often their only, blood pressure drug. How? Because nothing in your medicine cabinet beeps or flashes the day a guideline quietly shifts underneath it. No letter lands in your mailbox. The prescription just renews itself, quietly, every 90 days, riding on a decision somebody made about a different you years ago. The system is built to keep refilling, not to keep asking. And that is exactly how a pill that was reasonable in 2007 is still sitting in a cabinet in 2026, completely unexamined. Okay, so the guideline walked away from it for ordinary pressure. Fine. But that's paperwork. What does it actually feel like in a real body over 60 to be on the wrong one? That's the part that matters. And there are 3 specific ways it shows up. I've ranked them from the one you'll notice first to the one that worries me the most. Let's take them in order. The first one is the one I hear about more than any other: tiredness. But a very particular kind of tiredness. And once I describe it, you'll know instantly whether it's yours. Go back to that governor on the engine. A beta blocker caps how fast your heart is allowed to speed up. Now, for a younger person who spends the day at a desk, that cap is invisible because they almost never ask their heart to rev. But you are not sitting at a desk all day. You want to walk to the mailbox and back. Carry the groceries in from the car in one trip. Get up a full flight of stairs without stopping on the landing to catch your breath. Every single one of those ordinary things is a moment where your body says to your heart, "Speed up, I need more." And the beta blocker is standing in the socket saying, "No." So you run into a ceiling earlier than you should. Your legs turn heavy and full. You're winded before you feel you've earned any right to be. Doctors have a clinical name for this: chronotropic incompetence, which is a mouthful that simply means the heart can't lift its rate to meet the demand. It does not happen to everyone on these drugs. But for a lot of people, and especially for older folks who already have a little less in the tank to begin with, it is completely real, and it gets waved away as just getting older almost every time. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Walt, and I'll be upfront. Walt is a composite, stitched together from several people I've cared for over the years, so nobody real is being singled out. Walt was 71, a retired mail carrier outside Des Moines, a man who had walked professionally, 30 years of it, and who had kept up an evening walk around the block long into retirement because it was simply who he was. And he'd stopped. That's what his daughter noticed first, not the blood pressure, the walk. His knees were fine. His hips were fine. In his own words, he was running on empty by lunchtime every single day. He'd been on atenolol for 3 years for nothing but blood pressure. His previous doctor had chalked the fatigue up to his age, which, at 71, sounds perfectly reasonable, and so nobody had thought to turn the bottle over and read what was on it. And here is the part that's almost cruel, the part that makes this more than an inconvenience. The single best natural tool any of us has for lowering blood pressure is movement, walking, staying active. That's not a slogan, it's physiology. So follow the loop. When the pill quietly saps your appetite for moving, you do less of it. Do less of it, and the pressure you were trying to tame creeps right back up, which tempts everyone toward a higher dose, which drains your energy for movement even further. A pill whose entire job is to lower your pressure can end up sabotaging the one free, powerful thing that lowers it naturally. That's the trap inside the trap. So if you started a blood pressure pill, and you can look back and see your walks getting shorter around the same time, that timing is not a coincidence to shrug at. That's the first thing I want you to write down, not act on yet. Just write it down with the date. We'll use it. The second way is metabolic, and this is where I have to be precise, because this is exactly where the internet gets it wrong in both directions, either screaming that these pills give you diabetes or insisting they do nothing at all. The truth is narrower and more useful than either. The older beta blockers, and specifically atenolol and metoprolol, which are precisely the two that most people over 60 were started on, nudge your body in the wrong direction on two things at once: your blood sugar and your cholesterol. They make your cells a little more resistant to insulin. Let me translate that, because insulin resistance gets said 1,000 times and explained almost never. Insulin is the hormone that acts like a key, unlocking your cells to let sugar move out of your blood and inside where it's used for fuel. When your cells become resistant, the locks get stiff. The key still works, but you need more and more of it to get the same door open. And meanwhile, the sugar backs up in the bloodstream where you don't want it. These older beta blockers stiffen those locks slightly. Stiffer locks, more keys needed for the same door. And they don't stop at blood sugar. They also tend to push your triglycerides up and drag your HDL, the good cholesterol, down. All of it quietly, in the background, while the number on the cuff goes right on looking excellent. This is not a footnote. Remember that 30% jump in new diabetes from the ACE-COT trial? Here's the number that backs it up. A large analysis published in a US cardiology journal pooled together more than 94,000 patients and found that people on beta blockers had about a 22% higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes than people taking other blood pressure drugs. And when the researchers looked at which beta blockers were driving it, the worst offenders were, once again, atenolol and metoprolol, the old workhorses, the exact two sitting in the most cabinets. Different study, same needle pointing the same way, again and again. Now for the piece of nuance that hardly anyone stops to hand you, and it's exactly why I don't want you swept up in the internet's blanket panic. Not all beta blockers do this. The newer ones are built differently. Carvedilol, which is Coreg, And nebivolol, which is bistolic, actually relax your blood vessels as part of how they work, and they land close to neutral on your blood sugar and cholesterol. So if you turn your bottle over and you're on one of those, this particular worry is mostly not yours, and you can breathe out. This is really a story about the old guard, atenolol, and metoprolol, which just happen to be the ones handed out most freely for the longest time. And there's one more piece of the metabolic story that I treat as a genuine safety issue, not just a drawback, and it's for a specific group of you. Anyone here who has diabetes and takes any insulin or certain diabetes pills, go back to the sockets and the adrenaline. When your blood sugar drops too low, your body's alarm system is adrenaline, and the warning signs you feel, the racing heart, the shaking hands, the sudden anxiety, those are adrenaline hitting its sockets and screaming at you to eat something now. A beta blocker sits in those same sockets, which means it can muffle the alarm. It can blunt the pounding heart and the tremor that are supposed to warn you a low is coming. So a dangerous drop in blood sugar can sneak up further before you notice, sometimes with sweating as your only remaining clue. The alarm still rings. You just can't hear it as clearly. This is well documented, and it doesn't mean you can't ever combine the two. Plenty of people safely do. But it does mean that if you have diabetes and you're on a beta blocker, this is a conversation to have on purpose, and it's a reason to lean on your glucose meter rather than trusting how you feel. If nobody ever flagged that pairing for you, that alone is worth a phone call. Which brings us to the third way, and honestly, this is the one that worries me the most, because it's not a side effect you can feel. It's a blind spot. Stay with me on this, because it's the whole point of the video. A beta blocker usually does bring your number down. That's the seduction of it. Your cuff reads 128/78. Your doctor sees it and relaxes. You see it and relax. Everyone in the room agrees the medication is working. But look at what that number actually measures. It measures one thing, the pressure in your arteries at that moment. And that is the exact one thing this drug is good at moving. So underneath a reading that looks handsome, if it's one of the older beta blockers, your insulin resistance can be creeping up, your triglycerides can be drifting the wrong way, your good cholesterol can be sliding, and your energy can be draining out of you week by week, and not a single one of those shows up on the cuff. The number is a spotlight pointed at one corner of a dark room, and everything else is happening in the dark. You can have a genuinely beautiful blood pressure and still be quietly sliding backward everywhere the light isn't pointed. So here's the sentence I most want you to carry out of this video. A good reading is not proof of the right medication. Say it to yourself. A good reading is not proof of the right medication. The number on the cuff tells you the drug is doing its narrow job. It tells you nothing at all about what that same drug might be doing to the rest of you. And the more reassuring the number looks, the less likely anyone is to ever go looking. That's not a small oversight. That's the mechanism by which a person can spend 3, 5, 8 years slowly getting worse while every appointment ends with, "Your pressure's great, see you next year." There's a fourth thing I'll mention more briefly, because the internet badly oversells it and I won't. Beta blockers, like most drugs that bring pressure down, can hand you a wave of lightheadedness when you rise too quickly, that swimmy, gray half second as you push up out of a chair or up off the couch. Doctors call it orthostatic hypotension, which just means your pressure dips for a moment when you rise and gravity pulls the blood down. In a younger body, it's a shrug. In an older body, it deserves real respect because of what it can lead to. Falls are the leading cause of injury death for Americans over 65, and more than 1 in 4 older adults falls every single year. Now, I'll be straight with you. The evidence tying falls specifically to beta blockers more than to any other blood pressure drug is genuinely mixed, and I'm not going to pretend it's settled. But that dizzy moment when you stand is worth taking seriously on its own, because for someone your age, a single bad fall can be the thing that ends independence, and independence is the whole game. So it's one more reason these aren't usually the drug we reach for first in seniors anymore. All right, I've told you what can go wrong. Now let me tell you what the research actually favors instead, because that's the part you came for. But before I name a single alternative, pump the brakes, because what comes next matters more for your safety than anything else I'll say today. Never come off one of these on your own. Not cold turkey, not by quietly halving the dose, not by skipping it a few days to test how you feel. Here's why, and the mechanism is the whole reason. Remember those sockets the drug has been sitting in for years? Your body, being clever, has noticed they're blocked and has responded by building more of them, trying to hear the adrenaline again. So now you're carrying a heart studded with extra hungry sockets, all of them kept quiet by the daily pill. Yank that pill away suddenly, and all that adrenaline you've been holding back comes flooding into a heart that's now oversensitive to it. Your rate can bounce back up. Your pressure can lurch fast and hard. And in a heart that's already vulnerable, that surge can trigger chest pain, throw the rhythm into chaos, or at worst tip into an actual heart attack. Stepping down off one of these has to happen gradually, eased lower over a few weeks, with your doctor keeping watch the whole way. What I'm putting in your hands today is understanding, plus the right questions to carry in. It is not permission to open the cabinet tonight and start rearranging things yourself. Deal? Deal. And while we're on the subject of danger, let me draw the urgency lines cleanly, because not everything I've described sits at the same level. The tiredness, the timing of your walks, your morning cuff readings, all of that is the write it down and watch it category, the stuff you bring to a scheduled visit. Something clearly new or clearly getting worse, that's a reason to call your primary care doctor and ask to be seen this week. And for the things that need attention today but aren't life-threatening, urgent care exists, and it's faster and far cheaper than an emergency room. But here's the bright red line. If you, or someone near you, ever stops one of these pills suddenly and then feels a pounding, racing heart, chest pain or pressure, passes out, or feels the heartbeat turn wildly irregular, that is not a wait until morning situation. That is a call 911 situation. And I mean call. Do not drive yourself, and don't let them drive themselves, because an ambulance starts treatment the moment it reaches you, and the emergency room takes you back faster when you arrive that way. Those minutes are the ones that matter. With that nailed down, here is what the evidence favors for a person whose only real problem is high blood pressure, and I'll rank them the way I'd actually think about them. Start with the one almost nobody talks about, because it's old and cheap and unglamorous, and it happens to be excellent. Thiazide diuretics, water pills, chlorthalidone, or hydrochlorothiazide. They work by nudging your kidneys to let go of a little extra salt and water, which means there's slightly less fluid volume moving through your pipes, and less volume means less pressure against the walls. Simple. And here's what makes me want you to know their name. There was a landmark American trial, one of the biggest blood pressure studies ever run in this country, that pitted a thiazide against the newer, pricier drugs in more than 33,000 patients. The thiazide matched them and, on preventing heart failure, actually beat them. A pill that costs pennies a day held its own against everything fancier thrown at it. A more recent trial in over 13,000 older veterans confirmed these water pills still pull their weight in people your age and hinted that chlorthalidone may have a slight edge for anyone who's already had a heart attack or a stroke. The one thing to know is that because they move salt and water, they can nudge your potassium, so your doctor will check a simple blood test now and then. That's the whole catch. For a lot of ordinary high blood pressure, this unglamorous little pill is a genuinely great answer. Next, calcium channel blockers. Amlodipine is the big one. And remember, it's the drug that beat the beta blocker head-to-head in the Ascot trial. So how does it work? It relaxes the muscle in the walls of your arteries directly, so the pipes open wider and the pressure drops. That's the whole trick. It carries none of the metabolic baggage of the old beta blockers. And crucially for you, it puts no governor on your heart. No cap on your energy the moment you ask for it. For plenty of older adults whose only real issue is a high number, it's simply a cleaner fit for the life you're actually trying to live. Then a closely related pair, ACE inhibitors and ARBs. Names like lisinopril and ramipril are ACE inhibitors. Losartan and olmesartan are ARBs. Both of them turn down a hormone system your body uses to tighten your blood vessels and hold onto salt and water. Dial that system down, the vessels loosen, the pressure eases. These two are especially good at protecting your kidneys. They tend to shine for anyone who's simultaneously juggling diabetes, and they sit lightly on your metabolism. One quirk worth knowing, so it doesn't scare you if it happens. ACE inhibitors give roughly 1 in 10 people a dry, nagging cough. Harmless, but genuinely annoying. If that ends up being you, an ARB works through almost the identical route and rarely brings the cough along with it. For most people, a clean and easy swap. Now notice something about all three of those. The water pill, the calcium channel blocker, the ACE inhibitor, or the ARB. Every single one of them sits on that American first-line list I read you a few minutes ago. your beta blocker for plain blood pressure does not. That is not a coincidence. That is the entire reason I made this. But let me draw the line just as firmly in the other direction now, because I refuse to let one single person walk away from a medication they genuinely need. Have you had a heart attack? Do you live with heart failure, where the pump itself is weakened? Atrial fibrillation, where the upper chambers of your heart quiver irregularly instead of beating cleanly? Angina, that chest pain from a starved heart muscle? If any one of those is the reason you're on a beta blocker, you are in a completely different category, and the evidence to keep you right where you are is strong. Do not lump yourself in with the plain blood pressure crowd. And even here, I'll be honest that the science keeps moving, because that's the whole theme of today. Just in the last couple of years, 2 major trials looked at people who'd had a heart attack, but whose heart's pumping strength had stayed normal afterward, and found that a beta blocker didn't clearly add the benefit we'd long assumed. But, and this matters, those same researchers warned against simply stopping one you've been taking. So the lesson is never everybody off. The lesson is know exactly why you're on yours. If you can't say why, that's the flag. And while we're on the subject of assumptions worth re-examining, here's one more, quickly. Don't assume your target number is settled either. A major U.S. trial of more than 9,000 higher-risk adults found that aiming for a systolic pressure under 120, tighter than the old standard, cut cardiovascular events by about a quarter and deaths by about a quarter, and the benefit held up even in the group over 75. I'm not telling you what your number should be, because the right target is genuinely individual. I'm telling you, it's one more reason your whole blood pressure plan deserves a fresh look rather than another 3 years on autopilot. So what do you actually do with all of this? Nothing rash and nothing tonight. Here's the calm version in 5 ordered steps. Step 1, walk over to the cabinet and read the label out loud. Does that drug name finish with the 2 letters OLOL? Metoprolol, atenolol, bisoprolol, propranolol, carvedilol. And do you actually know why it's in your life? For blood pressure all by itself? Or for one of the heart conditions we just went through? If you can't answer that with any real confidence, you've already found your reason to pick up the phone. Step 2, put 3 things in writing before you ever set foot in the office, because a rushed appointment will swallow them whole. The first, am I taking this beta blocker purely to manage blood pressure? And if so, does that still line up with what today's American guideline actually recommends? The second, when did we last take a proper look at my A1C, my fasting glucose, and my cholesterol panel, knowing this drug can quietly move all 3? And the third, taking my full picture into account, would a thiazide, a calcium channel blocker, or an ARB suit me better than what I'm on right now? Write them on an index card and hand that card straight across the desk. Third, ask for a medication review. And here's a tip most people never use. If you're on Medicare, your annual wellness visit costs you nothing, no copay, no deductible, and hardly anyone books it. That visit is the perfect place to say, I've been on the same blood pressure pill for years and I'd like a fresh set of eyes on it. If a medication hasn't been reconsidered in 3 years or more, you are completely within your rights to ask, and a good doctor will welcome the question. Fourth, if the 2 of you do decide to change course, ask specifically about the taper, the gradual, monitored step down I walked you through earlier, spread across several weeks. Never a cold stop. And fifth, start gathering your own evidence now, before the appointment, because this is what turns a vague complaint into something your doctor can actually act on. Here's how to take a blood pressure reading that's actually worth trusting, the way the American Heart Association says to do it, because a bad reading is worse than none. Sit with your back supported and your feet flat on the floor, not crossed. Rest your arm on a table so the cuff sits level with your heart. Put the cuff on a bare arm, not over a sleeve. No coffee, no exercise, no cigarette for the half hour before. Then sit quietly for 5 full minutes, no phone, no talking. Take 2 readings a minute apart, once in the morning and once in the evening, for 7 days. Throw out the first day, it always runs high, and average the rest. Alongside those numbers, jot your energy on a scale of 1 to 10, and if you check it, your fasting blood sugar. 3 weeks of that turns, I've just felt tired, into a page of hard data, and that one page can change the entire conversation. Let me bring this home with Walt, the retired mail carrier who'd been running on empty. His story had a quiet, ordinary, and honestly pretty wonderful ending. His doctor agreed the atenolol had outlived its reason, and over about 8 weeks, slowly, carefully, moved him off it onto a combination without a beta blocker, a water pill, and amlodipine. And let me stay honest about how that actually went, because this kind of story gets dressed up far too often, and I won't do that to you. Walt did not wake up 2 decades younger. There was no soaring music, no montage. But within a few months, his blood sugar had drifted back down on its own. He'd dropped a few pounds he hadn't been trying to lose. And he'd started taking his evening walk again, the walk that was the first thing to disappear and turned out to be the truest measure of all of it. He told his daughter he felt like himself for the first time in a long while. And his blood pressure? It stayed exactly where it needed to be. A touch steadier, even. Here's the assumption that trips people up. They believe stepping away from a blood pressure drug has to mean surrendering the number. For the right patient, on the right replacement, that fear simply never comes true. That's the entire point of today. So if you remember one thing, let it be this. A good reading is not proof of the right medication. If the pill in your cabinet ends in Olol and it's there for nothing but blood pressure and no one has taken a fresh look at it in years, that is not an emergency. Nobody is in danger tonight. It is simply a conversation that is overdue. Read the bottle. Write the 3 questions. Ask for the review. And never, ever stop on your own. The medication you're on should still fit the person you are right now, not just the person you were the day it was first prescribed. Medicine keeps moving. Sometimes the prescription pad forgets to move with it, and all it takes is one good question to catch it up. Nowhere in here am I telling you to abandon a medication. I'm telling you something different. You have every right to ask whether the pill in your cabinet still matches the person swallowing it. That isn't being a difficult patient. That's being an awake one. And the awake ones are quietly the people who age the best. So if today shifted how you see that little bottle on the shelf, help keep this channel alive, tap, subscribe, and leave 2 things in the comments: your age and whatever drug name is printed on your own bottle. I read every single one, and they steer what I dig into next. And here's the ask that really counts. If there's someone in your life on a blood pressure pill who's been dragging lately, worn down, thicker around the middle, out of breath on a staircase they used to take 2 at a time, send this straight to them. One well-prepared conversation in an exam room can quietly reshape the next 10 years of a person's life. Look after yourself, and I'll be right here for the next one.